Welcome back again. And I'm going to answer even more of your questions. You asked a lot of them for the Q&A. So settle back and I hope you enjoy. Eris asks, how do you gauge when a design is ready to pitch? It's hard not to give an answer of something like, I just know. For me, when there isn't an obvious direction that I would take the game to improve it, that's a good sign that I'm nearing the point where I can't add anything more to it by working more on the game. So often you'll get to a point where you're like, oh, it's all working well, and there's nothing obvious that I would change in the game. So that's probably a good chance that it's a sign that the game is ready to pitch. If people I'm playing with are really enjoying it, is also a really good sign that it's ready to pitch. I imagine if I was to pitch the game as it is currently, would I be happy to put it in front of a publisher? Would I be making excuses for it or some part of the game? Like, oh, I'd be meaning to fix this, but don't worry about that. Or would I be confident in every aspect of the game that I'm putting in front of that publisher? If I can say yes, that I am confident in each aspect of the game, then I think it is ready to pitch. Of course, it's important to realize that that doesn't mean the game is 100% done. Even if I sign the game with the publisher, of course, they're going to want to change things and develop it. So I'm not worried about solving absolutely every problem or making sure that the game is absolutely balanced. But I think mostly I'd make sure that all the core systems are in place, they're working, I'm confident in them. And then I can take it to a publisher and say, look, this is how the game works. I'm aware that, of course, some of the cards might need a bit of tweaking, but I've got them pretty close where there's a predictable and fun experience that you have when you play the game. Eris also asks, what is your playtesting process? I wouldn't say my playtesting process is particularly different. Right now, actually, it's a bit unusual in that I don't really have a lot of access to playtesting. It's something I really have to fix as a full-time game designer. Ever since I left the UK, where I was really fortunate to have a weekly playtesting group that was really thriving, there are lots of designers coming along every week. That's an amazing resource to have. I haven't ever gotten something quite the same, either when I lived in Prague for 3 years or since I moved to Australia about 2.5 years ago. And I don't think I've fully adjusted to the change of playtesting resources that I have. And actually realizing that I have to maybe put a bit of energy to go out and make those opportunities for myself. Even to the point now where I realize I really should organize a playtesting night, at my home maybe once a week. I know Eric Lang used to talk about that he would invite playtesters to his house once a week or even more to playtest his games. Because at some point you're working on so many projects and you have so many things to playtest that even going to a playtesting night with other designers, you might get to play one of your games, which would be great. But if you have 4 in your bag, then those other 3 aren't getting playtested. I would say my playtesting process right now is quite haphazard. I'm quite reliant on co-designers often who have better playtesting setups or opportunities than I do. And I certainly make the most of times when, for example, I go to Europe once a year at the moment. We go with my family to the Czech Republic for about 3 months. And I have a lot better opportunities when I'm over there. I still have access to the old playtesting group and designers in Prague who meet fortnightly effectively, or sometimes even once a week. I'm able to visit people I know in the UK and Germany and other countries where there's a lot of playtesting opportunities as well, and I try to make the most of that particular opportunity to playtest in person. I really hate playtesting online. I hate Tabletop Simulator with an absolute passion. You could not pay me to work on that anymore. It was enough having to do it through the pandemic. I never want to touch it again. Because I'm not really a fan of online playtesting, and I don't have a lot of in-person playtesting opportunities right now, yeah, I'm a bit stuck actually. I'm trying to do my best with what I have, and sometimes that's just what you have to do. But in terms of the actual playtesting process, I wouldn't say it's particularly different to what's talked about or how I see a lot of other designers work. I make prototypes, I play them with other people, I rework them, make new versions of the prototype, keep playing them, and that sort of thing. And Eris also asks, how much do you care about theme, and does it bother you if a publisher wants to change the theme of a design? I would say there are 2 classes of games that I make. There are games which don't have a very strong theme, where I think the interesting thing about the game is how it plays, the mechanisms, or the experience it gives players. And in that case, often I'll have a very generic theme for the game, enough that will make sense as you play it and doesn't raise too many questions from the players or cause any confusion. With those games, if I sign them to a publisher and they want to change the theme, go right ahead. I don't have any real connection to the theme. I didn't give it necessarily a lot of thought either. I think the much more important thing of the game is how it plays. And so those instances, I have no worries at all. And that's happened a lot with my published games in the past. A lot of them have had their themes changed by publishers, and mostly I'm absolutely fine with it. Sometimes they might suggest something which I'm like, oh, that's not great. But in those cases, often they're open to suggestions from me if I have another idea that might suit what they're looking for. And so often we'll go back and forth and try and find something that we're both happy with. There is another class of game, which I haven't made as much of, but I am trying to do more of, where the theme of the game, or the setting of the game, is really linked to how the game plays and the overall pitch of the game. And in that case, I absolutely don't want the theme to change. Because for me, actually, the thing that makes the game great is how well the theme and mechanisms match each other. And I can't imagine that game having a different theme. And I would make that clear when I'm pitching that game to a publisher. I would say, this is a game with this particular theme, and I would show them how well I've integrated that theme into how the game plays. And if I've done the right job, hopefully the publisher will also see how important that theme is, and that it can't possibly be changed. And if I was ever getting to a contract point for that game, I would make it very clear that the theme of this game is not going to change. This is important to me. Of course, the name might change, or a particular illustration style might change. I don't necessarily have very set points on that. But if I've designed a game with the theme first and foremost, and additionally having the mechanics of the game match that theme really well and support it, yeah, I don't want to see it change. Craig asks, is there a design of which you are most proud? Well, it's like asking which of your children you love the most, isn't it? I'm quite proud of Next Station London. I feel like it's a game that I finished that was really close to the vision of the game I had when I started, and I'm really proud that I was able to deliver on that vision and a really strong idea. It also helps that it's been quite successful. It's hard to remove the performance of a game in the market from how you feel about it. I probably have quite, not negative feelings exactly, but feelings of disappointment around games which did poorly, which really has nothing to do with how well they were designed or how well I liked them, but it's hard to separate in my mind. And I think also with Next Station, I really enjoyed the process of working with Blue Orange. I worked with an amazing developer who really improved the game, so that was a really enjoyable process as well. And I think the game is just really fun to play. I don't think I've had any game where I have people coming up to me and say they've played it like 200 times. The fact that somebody can play it for that many times and still have fun and still keep wanting to play it, that's a pretty special thing, and I'm pretty proud of that. Craig also asks, is there a mechanism, genre, or theme you haven't yet designed but would love to use in a future design? I'm really interested in town planning and sustainable city development, and I'd really love to make a game where you're transforming a modern city or town and making it more friendly to people living in it and sustainable. I really like the idea of 15-minute cities and, increasing public transport and things like that. And I'm really interested in how we can develop better systems to make our cities more livable. And I'd really love to make a game around that where you're literally changing the board, maybe putting new tiles over things and improving the experience for the people living there. I guess it would be partly educational, but more than anything showing what's possible. I mean, one of the funny things about coming back to Australia, for instance, is that it's a very car-centric culture, unless you really live in the bigger cities, and I don't live in the bigger city, and I know you, Craig, also don't live in the bigger city in Australia either. And just questioning that assumption that cars sort of rule everything, and that what do you do if you don't have a car, as I do. So I think, it would be an interesting process, and I would really love to work on that idea with someone in the future. Craig also asks, what part of the game design process do you find the most difficult? I'm going to answer this question two ways. In terms of difficulty, I think the hardest part is somewhere between the first prototype and the prototype where things start to work, whatever number that might be. I think the first prototype isn't too bad because anything's possible. You haven't tested it yet, so you still have confidence in the idea, otherwise I wouldn't be working on it at all. After that first prototype, as long as there's something worth working on, then it can really feel like a bit of a slog and a bit disheartening, where you try new things, trying to find the promise of the game. Really, it's about not knowing what's the great thing of a game yet. You don't know which parts you should keep and which parts you should get rid of. And it can be a bit frustrating, a bit of a slog to work that out. So I'd say that's the most difficult part. I think the hardest part in terms of work is nearer the end of a game, or even the development of a game once it's with a publisher. I think I find it quite hard to maintain the enthusiasm for a game after I've been working on it potentially for many years at that point. Especially in the development process, you're trying to solve things, but you're under this pressure now of having to fit certain constraints for the publisher. You don't have as much freedom of what the game can be, so you have to be much more selective in the solutions you choose. It can really just feel like work, because you also don't have the choice once it's signed with a publisher, to abandon it. You have to find a way for it to work. You've done all the hard work to get here, and to not put that work in would be stupid. But it can be a bit hard when you've been working on it for so long and you're a bit burnt out from it. You maybe have tried a lot of things, so you don't necessarily have a good idea of how to fix a problem at that stage. So I'd say that's the harder part. The situation I described before where the prototype doesn't work is probably the most difficult and disheartening part. But it's not necessarily hard because you're not necessarily fixing really hard problems yet. You're trying to work out how the game is fun at all. And Craig also asked the final part of his question, what type of game will you never design? I'm the kind of designer who likes to try everything once. I've said in other videos that I don't like to design the same style of game over and over again. And I think if you have that view as I do, then never say never. I can't really see any type of game that I would make. Probably not a war game, realistically. It's not something I'm interested in at all, nor do I have any knowledge of the genre of games. But that being said, I know David Thompson, for example, if he came to me and said, I have a great idea for a war game, do you want to work on it? I'd probably say, yeah, why not? Because I collaborate with people, they're going to bring their own expertise and interests into anything, and I'm always up for learning about something I don't know and giving it a shot. Jay, I had to reread your question a few times. What existing game fits your design brand that you wish you had made? Probably Race for the Galaxy. It's usually the answer to a lot of questions, really. It's really on brand with the style of game I love. Special power card games and elegant systems of using those cards and minimal ways of using them. You know, in Race for the Galaxy, you only really have 2 resources, cards and points. I think it's a masterful design and I really wish I'd made it. But that being said, I'm glad it has been made. I might not have made the same decisions and I get to enjoy the finished product. So thanks very much, Tom Lehman. Jay also asks, is there a game you have designed that you felt shouldn't have worked as well as it did? Probably simpler games. I find harder to understand why they might be so much fun. And one really good example of that is Pray Another Day. It's a game where each player just has 5 cards. They have the same identical 5 cards as each other. And effectively, they're just cards numbered 1 through 5. It's a simple bluffing game where you're trying to outthink each other. And Brett and I, who designed the game, originally designed the game as part of this microgame series that we were making as free print and play games. It was originally called Good Little Hunters. And it had to fit the design constraints of being 27 cards or less. And so with that, we were able to make a 5-player game with 5 cards per player. And that's where the game started. It was really a design exercise almost. We never really thought that they were going to be huge commercial successes. We weren't even necessarily pitching them to a lot of publishers. I thought it was a fun kind of game, but I never thought that it would be as popular or be as successful as it has ended up being. Also, it took a really long time for it to get published. It was with a few different publishers who decided not to publish it for different reasons. So it was in limbo for a lot of years, and it can also feel a bit hard to believe that it's ever going to do well after going through that process. And so, of course, now that we're on the other side and it's sold tens of thousands of copies, I've been really surprised with how well it's done. And Gil asks, when you have a random mechanics idea, what questions are in your flowchart filter, by which you then go, yes, this is a good mechanical idea worth pursuing, or no, that won't work well? Well, Gil, I actually made a video all about that, which I'll link up here. A little bit more specifically to your question, which is about mechanisms. I actually don't really have that many mechanical only ideas anymore. I think I remember when I started designing, I would fill notebooks with a whole bunch of different random mechanics that I was sort of interested in. But I found actually that didn't really work very well for me. I needed more than just mechanisms. I would often make games which were a collection of interesting mechanisms, but I would always reach some sort of point where I would then have to decide what else you're doing in the game. And it felt so arbitrary what that decision was, and I think I would end up with faceless Euro number 13 kind of thing. And so from that experience, I've realized that for me, starting with mechanisms only just isn't very useful. And actually I don't write down many mechanisms anymore because mechanisms by themselves aren't very useful to me. I really need an idea of the whole game experience and being understand how pretty much all that you're going to be doing in the game and kind of what decisions you're going to be making. Of course, there'll be mechanisms I'll use in the games, but I think I rely probably more on just my memory of lots of different mechanisms, at this point, the experience of using them in a lot of games. I'm not too worried about trying to record a particularly interesting mechanism because the chances of writing down this one mechanism and then also later having an idea which is a perfect fit for that mechanism is quite rare. Or at least for me, I haven't had that happen to me very often. So yeah, maybe not exactly the answer you're expecting, but I found that worked pretty well for me. Thanks again for all your questions. I hope my answers were useful. And as always, if you have any other questions, do leave them down in the comments below. I'm thinking that I'll just start to make regular Q&A videos from all the different questions I get asked in the comments in various places, rather than being tied to a single event like a subscriber mark. Do ask your questions and I'll try to get them answered in a future video. But until then, thanks very much for watching and all the best with your designing. Bye.